Welcome. Today my guest is Stein Kruse, Group CEO of Holland America and Carnival UK. Welcome, Stein.
Thank you, Frank. Happy to be here.
I want to start with the cruise industry in general, and it's been especially hard hit by that pandemic. How can it survive?
Oh, it'll survive, and I also believe it will thrive in the future. But right now, it is challenging. We have, as you correctly point out, been hard hit. We had some highly publicized incidents, and just like travel in general, tourism in general, airline industry, we have been hit very hard. And one of the really unfortunate things is, and in business, we all know that scale is a benefit to have, but in a situation like we are in, where we have very little, if any, income and a lot of expenses, then the scale kind of works against us. So it is a little challenging, but we are, hopeful that as society adapts to the new norms, that we get the sort of the rules around social distancing, and most importantly, as therapeutics, medicine, vaccines, herd immunity, all of those things work itself through, we will be back, and we'll be back strong.
As you transition to the situation that we're in, where you can't set sail with your ships, what was one of the hardest decisions you had to make?
Two, really, Frank. One was, we have in Carnival Corporation 105 ships, of which more than half I'm responsible for, and they were scattered all around the globe, and each one on average has about 1,000 team members on. So we're talking about 100,000 plus people that all of a sudden weren't serving our passengers, and we needed to get them home, and they're from like 150 different countries. So getting that scale of people back across the world, with a world that is essentially was shut down for official airline transportation, was incredibly hard. But the biggest decision that I had to make was unfortunately having to lay off and furlough literally thousands of people. And each one of those has a story. Each one of those has a family, has a mortgage, has a plan, career ambitions, etc. And not being able to keep them employed, and for reasons that were entirely not their fault. Something, we didn't make bad business decisions. We didn't do mistakes. People didn't do the wrong things. It's just a set of circumstances, and having to tell these people that they no longer have a job, or they will be off work for months on end, very tough. You're never prepared for that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, the headlines often focus on the economic impact, but I think you raise an interesting point. There are people behind those numbers, and that's
Absolutely.
the hardest thing.
Totally. Every single one has a story, and I made numerous phone calls to people that I obviously know very well and I've worked with for years, and that's the one thing that resonates. But the amazing thing, Frank, and of course this is not necessarily the case for everybody, but people understand it. They get the fact that these are unprecedented circumstances, and that a business is just trying to survive. And if I can rehire everybody at the end of this, I will do so, because this happened through no fault of their own.
And you mentioned getting everyone back from wherever the ship was. Where are those ships? I mean, how do you park a ship for an extended period of time?
Yeah, I have a program on my laptop, which I'm speaking through right now, called Neptune Live. It's an internal proprietary system that shows everything about every one of our ships, from where they are, to how many people are on board, to how many engines they have on, to what fuel consumption, et cetera, et cetera. And these 105 ships are truly scattered across the globe. They are right now I have 17 ships sitting in Manila Bay, because we're repatriating 24,000 Filipinos, and that's a very slow moving process. They're scattered all over the world, Frank.
Oh, wow. Are you doing anything to those ships to get them ready for when you can set sail on cruises again?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So as we are reducing our team members on board the ship, particularly the front of the house people that serve guests, that waiters and clean rooms, and et cetera, we are reducing down to what we call minimum safe operational manning. That is the sort of, it's a technical term that basically ensures that the ship is ready to do anything, such as react to weather, or if there's an emergency, or if we quickly have to reactivate to go somewhere, we have the requisite manning on board. So that's what we're doing. So we're drawing down from originally about 125,000 people. And when our all 105 ships are in the ready state, we will have about 16,000. So we will have reduced by about 110,000 or so, 109,000 team members.
Yeah. Are you doing anything to the ships themselves to reconfigure it so that we can practice social distancing when we can get back to doing cruises?
Yeah, you know, that's a little bit of a challenging issue because, first of all, the cruise industry has for years and years dealt with the potential for something happening on ships.
Mm-hmm.
We have hospitals on our ships. Every ship has 2 doctors, multiple nurses. We have hospital wards on our ships. We've dealt with outbreaks of norovirus, so we have sanitation protocols in place. So the whole concept of screening and reacting to and cleaning and sanitizing and so forth is something we're completely familiar with. What we can't really predict is what is going to be sort of the pre-therapeutics, pre-vaccine social distancing rules and requirements around face masks and gloves and things like that. So we are right now in a no-sail condition. We are specifically requested by the United States Centers for Disease Control not to operate. So during this pause, we could, of course, come up with a number of things that we can do, and we have proactive things we can do, but we want to see what society establishes as those norms so that we fit into what casinos are doing or hotels are doing or theme parks are doing and so on. So there'll be some time before we're back in operation, and during that time, we can figure all that out.
Yeah, when you were describing that, Stein, I kept thinking, and what universities are doing, because we're doing the exact same thing, thinking about when we bring students back, are they going to have to wear masks? What about the social distancing? Right. What about temperature checks? You know, all the things you're thinking about, we're thinking about too.
Precisely.
Any predictions on when that first cruise might take place?
You know, it's very hard to say because there's so much, you know, you're a highly educated professor and dean of a business school. I've been in business for a long time. I believe in data, and I believe, you know, data will set you free eventually. If you have enough quantitative data and you have enough facts to underlie decisions, then you can make those kind of rational decisions. And I believe now we have sort of come through the worst of the pandemic during this first wave. There's so much data now that needs to be sifted through, needs to be understood, needs to be correlated to other pieces of information. And then determinations around operations. What do those operations look like? What are the duration of the cruises? What are the destinations? All of those things will harmonize and we'll come up with it. So when will it happen? Well, right now we've announced a pause in our operations through the fall. So will we be in operation sometime in late fall prior to the holidays? Perhaps. Will it be slightly after? We really don't know. One of the things we've done, of course, from a financial point of view is to reduce down our expenditures, make sure that we have enough financing available to get us through this. And that and taking care of our people and making sure we're compliant in all our operations are really the focus right now.
Yeah, a lot of the decisions that you've made, Stein, are very fluid. And so information's changing, we're getting new data. Do you have like a command center team that you bring together on a regular basis?
I do. And, you know, here's something absolutely crazy, Frank. You know, I have 2 offices here on the West Coast, one here in Seattle and one in just outside Los Angeles. And I go between the 2. And in each one, I have a kind of a command center, like you described it, with it's basically a room filled with all kinds of satellite things and video screens and different type of modules. And we, as I said, we can see where all our ships are. We can load onto the ship. We can communicate directly. And yesterday was 120 days since I stood up that emergency response organization. And that emergency response organization has not stood down for 120 days. And these people are, I mean, they're amazing. I mean, they're exhausted. Yeah. And of course, certain days are not as bad as others, but we have gone at this now for 4 months. And it is really amazing what these people, my colleagues, are doing to just make sure that everything we're dealing with, whether it's from passengers to crew to safety, to weather, to the repatriation, to ship maintenance, to you name it.
Yeah, with an unclear deadline on the horizon, because we really don't know what we'll get out of this. You know, each of your cruise lines has a unique brand and a slightly different target market. Can you talk a little bit about overseeing those different brands, and do you manage different cultures?
Yeah, very much so. It's a great question, actually. Carnival Corporation and PLC is our publicly listed company. It's a dual listed company, New York Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange. And the corporation has 9 cruise brands, and I oversee 6 of those. 3 in the United States, 1 in Australia, and 2 in the United Kingdom. And each one has somewhat similar demographics, but incredibly different psychographics. So if you ask me, you know, what's the difference between a seaborne customer and a princess customer or a Cunard customer, they're very different. They're very different. They may have, you may look at their household demographic income and say, okay, they're very similar, or you know, percentage of, you know, college education or percentage of retired or what have you. Some similarities, but you look at the psychographics, what their aptitudes are, what their interests are, how active they are, what they want to do, you know, when they're seeking a destination. Very different. So we've been able, from a marketing point of view, to create these separate swim lanes for the different brands that are very targeted, and which allows us to do that product differentiation that you're alluding to.
Yeah. You know, Stein, you're a very, very busy person overseeing a large organization, yet you stay involved with other organizations like Saltchuk, a very large private firm, and the U.S. Coast Guard Foundation. Can you talk a little bit about your commitment to serving those other organizations?
Well, first of all, it's interesting. You know, you get the different perspective, you get a broader view, and you failed to mention the Foster School Advisory Board, which I've been on.
I will get to that in a minute.
and I really, really enjoy that. It's part of it is continuous learning, being part of something that is different. So you focus a little bit different part of you. Some of it has to do with the fact that I believe that, you know, I'm 61 years old and I've been around a while, and I grew up in a foreign country, and so I believe I have a little bit to contribute here and there, and then there's also this whole thing about, you know, giving back. Read a book many years ago, maybe you read it, it's a very thin little book called Halftime, written by a guy by the name of Bob Buford. And basically, halftime is when you go from success to significance. And I've always liked that concept, because, you know, it's not anymore only about acquiring and establishing. It's also about being able to take what you have, turn it around, and give it back and pay it forward a little bit. So yeah, it's a little bit of that.
Yeah, that paying it forward is so important, and we try to instill that in our students even before they get into leadership positions, so that when they do, that they're actively practicing it.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the international piece. So you're originally from Oslo, Norway, and you've worked for a Japanese company. Can you describe how your international experiences affect your leadership style?
So I think, you know, when I was in Norway, when I was born in 1958, and when I was 18 years old in 1976, all what they called able-bodied men of 18 years of age had to go and do military service. So I was in the Norwegian military and really didn't have a sort of a clear outlook on what I was going to do after that. And I ended up through a circuitous route to coming to a United States university. And it sort of shaped my life a bit, because I came to the United States with 2 suitcases and not knowing a single person. And I ended up living here, ended up marrying here, ended up having my family here, and made a commitment to this great country. And in the process, I worked for different companies, including a large Japanese publicly traded company, and now for New York and London Stock Exchange traded company, and so forth. And I've traveled everywhere. I mean, travel is my business, and I've had the pleasure, the privilege of literally being everywhere. So I think I bring a perspective of sort of the rational European who comes from a social democratic country, with the free enterprise and capitalist attitude of the United States, with the sort of the, if you can say, the wisdom of having seen a lot and been to a lot of places. So I think as a leader, you know, I hopefully bring some of that to whatever conversation I'm having.
You mentioned traveling a lot, and I imagine a lot of that's on planes, but do you travel on your own cruise ships?
Wish I could do more, but when you have as many ships as I have, and there's only a certain number of days in the year that you can actually be there. But I try to see a lot of my ships every year, but I don't really get to travel on them. But every so often I have a chance to stop on one of the ships for a few days. And one of the things we do is we build a lot of ships, and the shipbuilding part is a lot of excitement around that, and taking delivery of a new ship and introducing her, that's a pretty special privilege as well. So I always try to do that.
Setting work aside for now, what personal interests do you have, and have you been able to do them in the pandemic?
So I have the privilege of having a house down in the desert. So I was looking forward to dog days this year, which didn't happen, but we'll be there next year. And so I spent part of my shelter at home period at our house down in Indian Wells. So I had an opportunity to, every so often when I had a little break, I would go outside and swim a lap in the pool or go for a run and try to stay healthy. I try to read a lot just to stay current, keeping the mental faculties going. Keen interest in my kids, one of whom is a double graduate from UW and foster school and got an MIS, Master's in Information Systems. So, family time is important.
So you had mentioned the Foster Advisory Board, and I thank you for your service on that. As a member of the Advisory Board, how do you perceive foster school graduates?
Fantastic. I have been associated with the board now for, I think, about 15, 16 years. And it is amazing to see what has happened, the transformation that has taken place with the school, the quality of the faculty, the quality of the students, the quality of the program, the improved academics, the improved facilities, the commitment of the advisory board members, the commitment of people like Jim and yourself and other leaders in the foster school. It's something to be proud of. It's something that we have here in the Pacific Northwest that is unique, and couldn't be happier to be associated with it.
Yeah, I think we have one of the more active advisory boards on campus, and I'm very appreciative that we do, because we've got expertise like your own, plus other people that just really help me as a leader running the school.
Thank you.
Last question for you, Stein. My wife and I have never taken a cruise. Any recommendations on our first cruise when we're back to sailing?
I think you should go up to Alaska. I don't know if you spent much time in Alaska, but Alaska is a phenomenal place, and it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from Seattle. You can do a 7-day inside passage. You get to see some of the most magnificent nature that God created, and unique characters in Alaska, beautiful scenery, nice people, interesting culture, fascinating heritage, and easy to get to with the ship, and very hard to get to driving or flying in because of the limited road system. So Alaska is great. And of course, you can never go wrong going to the Mediterranean and being on a ship. And one day you're in Monte Carlo, and the next one you're in Venice, and the third one you're in Athens, and don't have to pack or unpack, and you got this great value that a cruise represents. So yeah, I look forward to welcoming you and your wife on a cruise.
Thank you. I haven't been to Alaska since I was a young child, so it sounds like a great place to go. I appreciate the recommendation.
It is a great place to go.
Yeah, and thank you for your time today, Stein.
You're very welcome, Frank. Thank you.
And be safe.
Thank you. Same to you.